In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at the double exposure effect. So I picked an image of my grandma holding one of my second cousins at grandma's 90th birthday. I'm going to right click on the background layer, duplicate that layer, and click OK. And we're going to brighten this image. We're going to go over to Image, Adjustments, Levels. Our white slider, you can either grab it here or you can type it in. 197, and then the black slider over here, 7. Click OK. And next we're going to select the subject matter. I like using the quick selection tool, but you can use magic selection. You can also use a magnetic lasso. At this point, it's really more what's your preference. For the quick selection tool, I'm going to select as much as possible, but again, I hold down the Alt key or Option to deselect. All right, that looks like a good start. I'm going to select and mask, and then I'm going to change my view to black and white because sometimes that lets me catch some of those sneaky pixels, but it looks pretty good. And go back to Overlay. I'm going to turn on Smart Radius and just bring up the pixels so that it's catching maybe some of the subject matter that I failed to catch. I'm going to click Decontaminate Colors because that also catches some of the colors, and it defaults to New Layer with Layer Mask. Perfect. I'm going to click OK. Use Portrait Mask as the name, so perfect. And then this layer they actually call Portrait. And this layer, I don't have the visibility on that one. All right, so we're going to next create a new layer and make sure it goes below our portrait mask. This one's going to be called Background Color. We're going to come over and grab our Paint Bucket tool, which is underneath the Gradient tool. So right click on Gradient tool for Paint Bucket. The color that we're going to use, we can actually just type it in here to use DCD BD9, sort of a grayish color, and then you click on the background and it fills it in with that color. All right, next I have a landscape image here. I'm just going to drag and drop. This is from Luther Pass up in Lake Tahoe. Call it Forest. While I have the forest layer selected, I'm going to hold Command on the keyboard and I'm going to click the portrait mask, the mask on that layer. You should see the silhouette of marching ants on top of the forest layer. We're going to, again, having the forest layer selected, come down here and add a mask onto that layer. Now it has masked out all the negative space that's around the portrait. We're going to want to unlink the forest from the mask that we just created by clicking in between and removing that linked icon. Now with the forest selected, go to Edit, Transform, rotate it 180 degrees. It doesn't quite work for my image. I could use it, but it's not my preference. So you can decide if you wanted to flip yours or not. But I do want to transform, so I'm going to Command T on the keyboard. I usually tell you to constrain proportions as you're doing this, but in this situation, I think it's okay that the trees get really skinny. I'll leave it up to you to decide how you want to place yours. I'm going to come back later and crop the bottom of her skirt out of this image, so it's okay that you can see that little bit right now. So I'm going to transform it the way I would like it, and then either hit Return or this Enter key to accept that. And now flop the forest and the portrait mask layers, so we're back with the image of Grandma and the baby, and we're going to, with that selected, do Shift, Command, and the letter U on the keyboard, and we're going to desaturate it by turning it into grayscale. Then we're going to come up over to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and we're going to do a little bluish hue to the image. We're going to click Colorize first, and then for hue it's going to be 212, and for saturation 10. You can do whichever hue and saturation you like best, but I think this one works nicely. And then click OK. Now, what you're going to do is click the thumbnail of the mask and then right click and say Apply Layer Mask so that it applies it to that layer. Then come up to our blending options, change from normal to screen, and voila, you can start to see this double exposure image. This is dating back to using 35mm film and negatives in the darkroom and placing two negatives on top of each other, exposing it on the same sheet of paper. So that's the effect. Now what you can do is click on the icon of the forest mask, come over to your brushes, and you're going to select your airbrush soft round 17. I'm not sure where the opacity, maybe we'll start it at 100. And you can come in and start to reveal maybe some more of the forest. So I'm just kind of playing around here to show you how the brush is working. You can also have fun with this. You can change this close crosshatch brush is pretty interesting. So why not just have some fun? And I don't think this has been so successful for my picture. I'm not sure that I like that effect on this image. So I can always go back and undo in my history and step back to the last step and just leave it the way that it was before. And now for continuity's sake, the portrait mask in the tutorial becomes portrait screen, and on that, while you're selected on that layer, you can use that same brush. I might change the opacity so it's not so strong. Somewhere in the 30s works nicely. And what they're doing is they're bringing up the contrast in the trees. So if there's any part of your image that you want to darken, just make sure you're on this portrait screen and have the color black as your foreground fill color. And as I'm coming over, it's just bringing out that image a little bit more. If I want to do the opposite and bring out Grandma to show her face a bit more, I'm going to come over and create a new layer. I'm going to drag it below the portrait screen. This layer is called Darken. Click on the color here to F2, C35. Click OK. Again, I like my opacity to be low on this one. And come in and we can make Grandma's facial features stand out a little bit more. And same with the baby. If you'd like to, you can also hold Command and click on the mask here on the forest layer to get the marching ants. And this will make sure that you are in that selected mask. And I'm going to hold my square bracket key to enlarge the brush, darken things in a bit. Command minus sign to zoom out, Command D to deselect, and I really like how this looks. If I wanted to make changes to where the trees are, I can come back and click on that forest image, Command T, and now that I can see Grandma a little bit better, I can make any final adjustments there. Click return, and then my last step is that I'm going to crop. I'm going to use the rule of thirds and put Grandma up here where these two cross, and put our little baby down here where these two cross. Click enter or the check mark to accept this. And I think this looks pretty great, and save as a PSD and a JPEG.